Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Well, welcome to Why the Long Face?
Yeah, welcome to episode 5, I believe. No, episode 6.
It's six of the second season. Yeah, well done for keeping count.
Wow.
Yeah, we've got this far. We've nearly made it to Christmas.
Well,
this one comes out.
The thing is, the subject is today is the special K, of course.
It's
and
the
that
K-hole.
can affect your time perception. So
Very good.
shouldn't have had so much ketamine last night.
You love a bit of ket.
I love a bit of K.
You've disappeared down the K-hole,
I did, yeah.
you've
I've only
come back
just
up.
emerged.
But you've come back smiling.
Actually, I didn't take any ketamine, folks.
Not last
It's not really my drug of choice. My drug of choice is a nice
Brewdog.
IPA.
You've gone on the IPA. I'm still sticking with my I was going to say wife beater, but
I'm just going to have a little sip of this. So anyway, we it's important to talk about this, isn't it? Ketamine?
yes, I think so. I mean, you've talked about it a lot off mic, as they say, and so I think because I was wondering whether it supported its own episode. I was saying, look, we talked about cannabidiol, cannabidiol. That's it. And I say, isn't this just another drug that is not part of the mainstream that could deal with mental health? But you said no, it's a special case. It needs its own episode. You know?
Yeah, I think so, because it is way further along the line of being approved in the UK and is already approved in the US for the treatment of depression. But people who've not responded to 2 or more antidepressants, which makes up about 27% of people with depression, who would qualify for the definition of treatment-resistant depression.
TRD.
Yeah. Failed to respond to 2 or more adequate trials, and the stress adequate trials, of enough dose and duration of antidepressants.
So that was going to be one of my questions. I think you answered it already, and that is, what is TRD? And it's treatment-resistant depression. And the other thing I wanted to make clear, we talk about major depressive episode, resistant depression is different from a major depressive episode, I take it.
It's a major depressive episode that hasn't got better.
I see. So every...
that's all really. It's no different in its characteristics than any other depression, I guess.
It's just harder to
It's
treat.
It's not been shown that there are any differences really in the nature of it. It's just that it's not responsive
So you'd say that
to the usual treatments.
So you'd say that every TRD is a major depressive episode, but not every major depressive episode is going to be treatment.
Is going to be treatment resistant. Majority are going to be are going to respond.
Nice one.
Yeah, and response is carefully defined as well. Because that's the next question.
Yeah,
what do you mean by it doesn't respond?
Exactly
Is that going to be your next one?
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry, man. I'm taking your job away from you.
Not
again.
at all. Well, let's just call this a monologue, and I'll just sit here drinking and watching you.
So, response is defined as a greater than 50% reduction in your depression rating score on usually the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, but there are other scales that are used in research. They are usually observer rated. In other words, rated by the clinician, rather than the person themselves.
Rather than the patient.
Yeah.
Can you self-administer one of those questionnaires?
No, by definition. Well, no, because they're not validated to do that. There are self-administered questionnaires that are very good, like the Beck Depression Inventory, which
of course we have talked
before.
about, parts 1 and 2.
Yes, exactly. So that's response. So response is not the same as remission even, right?
Right.
And we should be trying to get to remission where people have no clinically obvious depressive symptoms or very, very low scores on them.
I see. So at 50% reduction, that's a response, but it's not a remission.
It's not a remission.
What would a remission be? Or can you quantify that?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I mean, you can't quantify it for all scales because all scales have different sensitivities. But for example, in the Beck Depression Inventory, you define it as a score of less than 15.
Right.
On that.
Okay. Because the first time you said it was 50% reduction, which is of course relative to the severity of the first.
To the severity. Yeah.
The second number you mentioned sounds like an absolute.
Yeah, it's a cutoff.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
based on, you would hope, a decent sample size.
I think that makes a load of sense. So you're saying response is proportionate to how bad you are feeling, and yet remission is a level of wellness.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense, man.
Defined on a scale, but also, importantly, should be defined in terms of your functioning.
Yeah.
Have you got back to work?
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
Are you out socialising again?
Yeah.
Are you doing all your hobbies that you used to enjoy?
Yeah. It's
So in
funny.
all those domains.
I
Yeah.
have to confess, I had a conversation with a relative of mine who is suffering a little bit with depression at the moment, and I went through all these things.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I think they're in a better place, and hopefully it's not too debilitating. But I was going through all these things that you taught me about agitation, about being able to not relax, loss of appetite, and the crucial thing I think is really useful when you're trying to work out whether someone that you care for is suffering is loss of enjoyment in things that they used to enjoy.
Right. I think that's key. It's central. Yeah.
Yeah. From what you taught me,
because there are lots of other things that can perhaps disturb your sleep or make you temporarily sad, but you still got that ability to snap out of it and enjoy a good movie, or a nice meal, or a sunset.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're depressed, that is really quite diminished and blunted.
Yeah, well, like I checked with you off mic, she is still able to enjoy a family get together almost as much as she used to.
Almost as
so
much.
that made me feel. I felt a bit like a fraud, like unqualified to help her, but
Definitely not, man. Definitely not. As someone who's been through it yourself, you're very, very qualified.
well, maybe that helps. But it was interesting. Anywho, back to Special K, back to the Ket. Let's go down the K hole. So this drug, it sounds big and scary, and people say horse tranquilizer. And shit like that. And you think, well, I don't know whether that really could have a medical consequence.
Well, it's definitely used by vets. There's no doubt in it. But it's also been used in children and in war zones.
Is it a matter of dose?
I think it's about dose.
Also, why horses? Why are horses so the ones that come time and time again when I search?
Yeah,
donkeys.
Yeah, good question, man. We need to get a vet in here.
Hamsters?
We need a veterinary guest.
Yeah.
Please come forward.
Why horses?
I think we'll just re-record this with a vet.
Yeah, why not? With someone good.
Yeah.
But so
I don't remember it featuring in James Herriot's novels.
James,
the line of K. So he's gone down. My horse has gone down. In the line of K.
James,
and we'll operate immediately.
Catch it off his tits.
He's just had a bit of his own horse tranquilizer.
My secret
He's having a bad day.
My secret is a little bit Winston, Winston Churchill. Remember from All Creatures Great and Small. James, flatten it with some ket.
Oh, yeah, it does. Yeah, that is
gone back.
It's quite Winston. Yeah.
No, he was very limited. All I do is German and Winston.
That's why you're not a primetime actor.
Yeah.
And he is.
Yeah. Passed away now, sadly, Richard Hardy. But
yeah, he did quite a while back.
So this is very different from cannabidiol. And let me get this right. This is particularly for treatment-resistant depression.
Yes.
And the other thing is, it's presumably the dose is a lot less than it would be to knock out a horse.
I don't know what the dose is to knock out a horse, but I should imagine, because horses are quite big creatures.
Yep. Should we get an expert in?
We should, yeah. But definitely the doses are less than anaesthetic doses that have been used clinically in kids. Right?
Anaesthetic, as in to put them through?
Well, to perform minor operations, yeah, or minor procedures, or to get injured soldiers off the battlefield in Vietnam. Amazingly, it was used as a field anaesthetic in the Vietnam War.
So I think most people know this, but just to be clear, I've read it's anesthesia. It has anaesthetic properties and analgesic properties.
Yeah.
Now, one of those is which way around is it?
Right. So analgesic is a pain reliever. Mm-hmm. So at a relatively lower dose, it would relieve pain, and in fact, it's been used as an analgesic in people with painful end-stage cancers for quite some time in hospice care.
Right.
Often oral ketamine.
Right.
That's the thing about ketamine. Pretty much doesn't matter which mode of administration you use. It's very versatile in that respect. You can give it intravenously, you can give it orally, you can give it up the nose, you can give it sublingually, you can give it subcutaneously, you can give it intramuscularly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love that shit.
And the sorts of doses that you would be taking to get off your head.
Mm-hmm.
In a kind of club situation or whatever.
In a club situation.
in a club setting. Therapeutically, it'd be about 0.5 milligrams per kilogram of weight of the individual. You're not going to be that precise when you're snorting a line in a nightclub.
You'd see a sort of pound and a half.
But it's probably going to be 4 times that, I'd say.
Right. And what does it do? Is it euphoric? Is it hallucinogenic? Is it a thing that you dance?
It gives you this slightly out of body experience. I suppose, like a lot of drugs, including alcohol, it makes you less self-conscious,
right?
And more disinhibited. But at higher doses, people use it, I think, because they like to explore the boundaries of reality and go into a bit of an hallucinatory experience.
So there is hallucinations associated
if
with
you
it.
Take enough of it, yeah. And in fact, if you use it as an anaesthetic at a high dose, and this is the reason why it didn't really take on as an anaesthetic, it's quite common for people to, as they become conscious again, to hallucinate and depersonalise.
As they regain consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a bit. That's not what you want.
As you can imagine, as it starts to get cleared from your system. Yeah.
Because the other thing I read is that it's very fast acting, and you'd imagine that would be
Very
pretty
rapid.
essential with a recreational drug.
Yeah.
But does that mean people can have their symptoms of depression relieved rapidly?
Yeah.
That's absolutely incredible.
No, that's why it's created such a buzz, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's important to say that there are lots of other ways in which you could perhaps very quickly relieve your depression a little bit. If you took a bit of heroin, you took a bit of cocaine, that might do the job. But the point is you need to take something which not only has a rapid onset of action, but has a sustained benefit and doesn't have all the adverse effects that those other drugs do.
Right. And is that true in case?
So ketamine doesn't have a sort of come down that you'd have perhaps from MDMA or cocaine, these other stimulants. I mean, I suppose ketamine would come under the category of stimulant, even though when people take it, they often feel sedated and they can, be immobilized or paralyzed for a bit. A friend of mine, a long time ago.
Friend of mine.
Yeah, no, definitely not me, I promise.
Well, okay.
But he was with us it was a night out in Shanghai, which sounds sordid straight away, doesn't it? But
it does when you say it.
Let's say he lived a full life.
Right.
And a nocturnal life. He's clean living now.
Oh, right, good.
He's completely reformed character. I think largely because of a lady he met who's into whole foods and chakras. But he used to. He was
inspired.
He thought he was offered this wrap of something, and he assumed it was cocaine and snorted a line of it. It turned out it was ketamine.
Right.
And this happened when we were, I don't know, talking to some ladies or something, having a drink and just having a nice time, and we had no idea where he was. And he spent the rest of the evening rooted to the spot, basically drooling. I'm not sure if he actually managed to pee himself, but these are known side effects of overdosing on it.
God, how was he conscious of what was going on? How did he feel after?
He was, and he was a bit upset that he couldn't get hold of any of us.
Right.
Well, we didn't know where he was.
Blimey.
And we assumed, we had no idea that this has happened. Managed to come out of it and get himself home. Because I think the acute effects tend to wear off after about an hour.
So that was my question. So if you're acutely depressed, and chronically, you're very seriously depressed, it's treatment resistant, you take some ketamine, it makes you feel better. At a medicinal dose, not as a recreational dose. How sustainable is that?
Yeah, it's important to say a medicinal dose is much lower.
Yeah.
And you're aiming to avoid any of those kind of hallucinatory or depersonalization type effects that some people, if they don't know they're coming, are going to find particularly distressing. So the answer to your question is, if you're going to get any of those adverse effects, or unwanted non-therapeutic effects, they're likely to happen in the first hour and then subside. But the therapeutic effect appears to persist for days after one single dose, and that's what's exciting about it. So it seems to do a kind of reboot of the brain somehow.
A little bit like, we talked about ECT in season 1.
Yeah.
It's when you said reboot of the brain, that's what made me go back to that.
Yeah. So its mode of action is still unknown, but we think that its primary action is a blockade of NMDA receptors in the brain. It's a particular class of glutamate receptor, but then that has knock-on effects that we think increases the amount of activation of the brain by glutamate through a different set of receptors, with GABA as another neurotransmitter as an intermediary step called GABA. Reduces inhibition by GABA. Right. Glutamate is excitatory, GABA inhibitory. Glutamate stimulates, GABA slows you down, calms you perhaps. So essentially it might be activating the brain in ways that we don't understand that help to reverse this sort of depression of the nervous system, if you like, central nervous system. But we don't know why it's sustained, why this therapeutic effect is sustained. We can accept that it's rapid, but in most cases, when you've got an antidepressant that works quickly, it tends to resolve quite quickly as well. Whereas in the case of ketamine, it seems to have a sustained effect in a high proportion of people who take it. And we're talking about a treatment-resistant population here because it's more controversial to say, oh, well, let's just try it on anyone who's depressed, because they, until you've got a good evidence base there, they'll be saying, well, is that ethical when you've got these other antidepressants that we know are at least this effective?
It's again the ECT argument, which sounds like a barbaric treatment, but I guess when you're the person who is still suffering and can't find a cure, you might try it, and your clinician might advise you to try it.
No, it's absolutely right. You're right, because ECT it's the same sort of population that you're considering ketamine for. It's the population that you give ECT for, so the people that are relatively treatment resistant.
Right.
But how long you can sustain the therapeutic benefit of ketamine is still being investigated. We know from early studies that it peaks at 1 day. I mean, it's already pretty high at 1 hour, but peaks at 1 day.
What, in terms
and
of
it's still
mood
pretty,
change?
Yeah, and it's still... So we're talking about 70% response rate, between 65 and 70% response rates of what...
And these are already resistant patients.
Yeah, consistently shown. And about a 30% remission rate. So that is very impressive. In fact, even more impressive probably in the world of psychiatry, because it's harder to achieve remission. Could well be that ketamine in combination with other talking therapies and so on and so forth could actually achieve a higher level of response and remission. So a lot of these early studies showed that benefit was then sustained for 7 days, and in some cases 14 days after one dose.
It does make you think, doesn't it? When you just said sometimes talking therapies in combination is going to help, and you think if it has that sort of reboot action, that almost kickstart and gets you into a place where you can suddenly start to...
Where you're open then to other treatments.
Yeah, exactly. It just kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
One question I have.
And of course, it can be used alongside conventional antidepressants as well. There's no...
Okay.
I mean, although a lot of the studies have used a washout period where they've taken people off their as usual treatments, other studies have used it alongside treatment as usual, which is interesting.
Right.
Or have looked at using it alongside the prescribing of a new antidepressant, a new course of treatment, to speed up the response to that treatment and actually increase the response rate, which early studies show it does.
So the one question I have, and that is, you've talked in the past about SSRIs, selective serotonin re-inhibitor.
Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Bollocks, got it. And they seem to take a long time to act. But I'm sort of getting...
All conventional antidepressants do.
Right. Yeah, okay, exactly.
Yeah, not just SSRIs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get the impression that maybe, though, once you've got that plateau of recovery, it's more sustainable or predictable than with ketamine. The reason I'm asking this is, if ketamine is such a wonder drug, why don't you use that as the first response, as opposed to a more conventional antidepressant? Or is that the way we're going?
The answer is we don't know if that's where we're going, because we haven't done enough research on it yet. What we do know is that it causes a response in a large number of people. We know that it is not sustained, though, usually beyond about 7 days. So the new challenge is to work out ways in which we can sustain its therapeutic response.
Right.
And the other important thing to say is we need enough data to be sure that it's safe.
Here's a question I've never even considered before, but because we've done a couple, almost a suite of these kind of podcasts on, you might call them unconventional cures, or cures that come from the narcotic world. Is there anything that says there is some advantage of making use of drugs that are used recreationally because they exist and have been used by humans for a while?
Yeah.
So there's sort of field trials, even if they are in the club setting, if you like.
Yeah.
Whereas a brand new drug would have to go through...
Yeah. Well,
it's true, maybe.
Yeah, but new, even if they're existing drugs, they still need to go through trials of their use in different settings, in different contexts, and for different conditions. And if you're saying that it's necessary to give multiple doses of ketamine to someone with TRD to maintain their improvement, which I think most people are arguing now, those that have responded, there's a very good chance that they'll respond to repeated doses of ketamine. The clinic in Oxford, which is again in a closely controlled research environment, they give an IV infusion and then they let individuals go away with a solution which they take orally, and they take perhaps 2 doses every week to maintain their improvement. And they've done a lot of work on that for years now, and they've not shown any serious adverse effects.
Amazing.
Whereas recreationally, if people use it over and over and again at higher doses, the biggest risk that's been identified is a bladder irritation, which can go from irritation to quite serious fibrosis, and to the point where it's causing urinary retention, which is not good news.
And that's not what's happened in patients.
That's not what's happened at this level of prescribing.
How long has ketamine been used in the States?
I'd say 10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So not yesterday. It's been a few
That's
years.
right, because the first study showing promise was in 2006. I have to say there wasn't rapid take-up. It probably the last 5 years has been used more.
Right.
In the States.
No, it does sound good. This is what Vice says. Right, quite interesting. Yeah, website. They said, doctors love. I think it's American.
Yeah.
Doctors love ketamine, the hallucinogenic drug that can relieve pain at lower doses. I think I might want to read this out like a 1950s news.
Go for it. Start again.
Doctors love ketamine, the hallucinogenic drug that can relieve pain at lower doses and function as an anesthesia at higher ones. Ketamine can also help treat suicide ideation, and some people are using it off-label for pain and treatment-resistant depression. It's an enticing medication as far as depression is concerned because it can start working in as little as 40 minutes, whereas traditional antidepressants can take weeks to kick in. But evidence of its antidepressant effects comes from anecdotes and studies involving fewer than 100 people. There has never been a large-scale clinical trial to test the safety. I'm going a bit Jewish now. To test the safety and effectiveness of putting depressed people in the K-hole. I don't know where I'm going now. Italian American.
Yeah. Or even Bronx.
Slightly Bronx.
Like
now,
Scorsese.
New analysis, a little
going
bit
a bit
mob,
Scorsese.
bit mob now.
But yeah.
Now a new analysis is offering more evidence from the wise guys.
But let's just go to default Yorkshire.
Right. Doctors love
Posh.
ketamine. Ketamine can also help with suicidal ideation. The reason I read this out was about the suicidal ideation bit, because we did an episode on suicide in season 1, and there was we talked about you talked about when someone has a vague idea that the world will be better without them, and then they have an actual plan, and then they have enactment.
Different levels of intent.
Yeah, and also, but there was this idea that if you have compulsions, you're going to act compulsively, and if you have a particular a bit acute.
You mean if you're an impulsive character, you're more likely to act on them.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if
these thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
And does ketamine? You're wondering what ketamine does to that impulsivity?
Perhaps, yeah. Well, not perhaps. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
I don't know if it has an independent effect on impulsivity. What I do know is it's certainly been shown that it reduces suicidal ideation.
Yeah,
within the hour, which is sort of what you'd expect. If it's having a rapid effect on mood, you would have thought it would also have a direct effect on suicidal ideation, given that tends to be secondary to mood change.
That does make sense. That's incredible. I mean, so you could literally see a patient go from a period of saying, I can't see a way through this, doctor, I really want to end it all.
Yeah.
In tens of minutes to a point where they're saying, hang on a minute, I'm reassessing. That's almost unbelievable.
I've actually seen it. I've been over to Oxford to see Rupert McShane's work, and he was giving an infusion to a lady who was expressing a lot of suicidal ideas, and within minutes she was much calmer.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
And obviously be treated with caution.
But treat it with caution, because you're absolutely right. What they say is that most of the studies have used less than 100 individuals in the trials. It's absolutely the case. It's only now that we have a drug that's being developed by a big pharma company called Johnson & Johnson.
Oh yeah, heard of that.
Which uses the S isomer of ketamine and is packaged in a little vial with a nozzle that goes up your nose. You give it yourself intranasally.
Is it a vapor or a powder?
I think it's a powder.
Up the nose.
And then
How extraordinary.
It's been shown to be efficacious and safe. So it is approved now by the FDA in America.
It's a balance, isn't it, between what, desperately wanting to stop suffering and not wanting to experiment on your desperate patients. Because, I mean, the clinician is desperate in a way as well to help this person. And I'm wondering, a lot of what you say when I've been asking you questions is a very honest answer, but you go, we don't know. And how does that go down with patients generally? Are they, I suppose maybe the more desperate they are, the more they're willing to accept
patients
that. Do they say, what do you mean you don't know? You're a doctor. Do you ever get that?
Patients appreciate honesty. And
I'd have thought so.
And at the basis of any therapeutic relationship is trust. So I think if you say, look, we don't know for sure if this is going to help you, but I have there's enough evidence for me to say I think there's a good chance it'll help you.
Yeah.
And I think this is what I recommend. Better to try this than not. And this decision's not irreversible. Let's give it a try. Let's go for a trial.
Nice. I would definitely...
And that's the sort of thing you have to do, I think, at the level where you're dealing at the sort of edge of scientific knowledge, really, with people that are in extremis.
I'd definitely come to you if I was very depressed. I'd definitely come to you.
I'd sort you out.
Thanks, man. You give a very comforting and honest... You're right about honesty, actually. I'm sure that's what people want.
Yeah.
These, like you say, extremists. So I was reading a fabulous presentation, which was given at the Centre for Neuropsychiatric Genetics and Genomics in Cardiff. Right. It was called I Heart Ketamine by an exciting young consultant psychiatrist and honorary senior research fellow, Dr. Paul Keedwell. By the way, when they say honorary senior, does that mean they don't have to pay you?
Correct.
Really?
Yeah, they're getting me for free.
Nice one.
Yeah,
got a whole you for free. What a bargain. So, what were the main points of that presentation? Who are you presenting to? Because I read it and I learned a lot.
I was presenting to other psychiatrists, really.
Ooh, tough gig
in the general adult psychiatry community.
They're all as mad as cats,
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, and I think the reaction was mixed. I think a lot of people are very excited by it, but a lot of people are very wary of it, be they general adult psychiatrists or professors, are worried about its addictive potential.
Yeah.
And, you can't shy away from that issue. You've got to address that full on and say, yes, but there is a difference between addiction and dependency, or rather, one needs to consider what sort of dependency you're talking about. If I give you an antidepressant that works and cures your depression and prevents you from getting depressed again, you could argue that you're dependent on that medication to stay well.
Yeah.
That's different from you seeking to constantly up the dose of it, getting tolerance to it, compulsively using it,
craving it,
and so on. In the sense of drug dependency that most people think about. So I think it's rather meaningless to say, but someone could become dependent on ketamine. That's what's happening in the States. People are going back and back for more and more of this stuff. And I was thinking, well, if you had really severe depression, nothing else had worked, and this works for you, and you kept going back for more, that's not totally surprising, is it?
No, it's utterly rational.
It does mean that you have a huge responsibility as a clinician when you start it, because the big ethical question is, when do you stop it? Or can you ever stop it? Should there be limits to your prescribing? Should you say, look, I'm going to give you this for 3 months, and over that 3-month period, we're going to establish you on more conventional antidepressants, or we're going to try talking therapies, and then after that 3 months, it's stopped. But you can straight away see that, people are going to resist that if it's the one thing that's caused them to go into remission.
And yet, if you suddenly develop type 2 diabetes, and therefore you need
you're dependent. Insulin, you're dependent on.
Do you create
you're dependent on glycoside or metformin or whatever. Or
it's strange, isn't it? But there is that. Are you dependent on it? Well, it helps you with an illness you have. So in that sense, you are dependent on it. So, but what's the big deal? But I did read in a couple of places the fact that your tolerance to this drug can increase with use. So could it be that
it can?
Even in therapeutics,
you can get tolerance to it. Yeah.
Right. You might need more and more.
But what Rupert McShane has noticed, and other researchers that have embarked on longer term prescribing is that there is no tolerance. No tolerance develops provided you give them the correct dose at intervals. So the idea is if you give it more than twice a week, that you might develop tolerance. But if you give it at that sort of frequency, then people don't. So it's down to frequency and dose, I think.
Right. So it's almost as if your tolerance falls off if you have a gap between taking the doses.
Yeah, you're probably going to be excluding at the outset people who have a history of excessive and harmful drug use. You're dealing with people that are not prone to misusing recreational drugs.
Oh, right.
And let's not forget that ketamine was not a drug of. It's not like cannabis. It's not like psilocybin. This was something that was introduced as a medicine.
Oh, right.
And then was used recreationally from the 90s onwards, I guess.
Right. Oh, that's an interesting, history. It's slightly different, isn't it? So it was, it started off respectable, to quote Mel and Kim, and then became a party drug, and then it's sort of going back to respectability as well. Ah, that's interesting.
It's the same mark as cannabis, actually, but...
Really? So I went through this presentation. When you say it was mixed results, did you get people coming up afterwards and being concerned that you were punting this as a miracle drug?
No, because I wasn't punting it.
But I put it to you, Dr. Keedwell, that the title of the presentation was I Heart Ketamine. There's no way around that. It wasn't in a very measured way. Quite heart ketamine. It was, and I quote, I heart ketamine. And it was a heart symbol as well. It wasn't even the word.
Yeah.
Using modern iconography.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you have to use certain techniques to get people through the door.
It was very eye-catching.
To compete with other talks.
Yeah. How many did you get to your talk?
Oh, massive number.
Did you?
No, it was a full auditorium, actually.
Good for you, man.
But it was part of a series of talks, so we don't know if they came to see my talk specifically.
I bet they did.
It was, it was the Royal College of Psychiatry conference in Edinburgh.
Wow, we should do
some time ago, eh?
We should do a live show.
We should, man. We should
do a live show. I'd love that.
On ketamine?
That would be hilarious legal. That would be quite good.
I remember it wouldn't be illegal either. Actually.
What? I remember Dr. Robert Winston. Is he a Lord now?
Lord Winston, yeah.
Lord Winston. He was a great pioneer of conception outside the womb, wasn't he? I don't know if that's the right expression. Anyway, test your babies, let's call it. And he did a televised experiment where he got drunk. God bless him.
Yeah, I remember
awesome.
Yeah.
He didn't have that much.
Yeah.
But he just sort of wandered off and got jolly.
Well, it's good TV, isn't it? Michael Mosley as well took some psilocybin, didn't he, for that trial? Yeah. And MDMA, I think.
I think we don't be scared taking
in the research context.
No, I think I'd be. I suppose we've got to go into a little bit more about how it works.
If anyone wants to say to you they know exactly how ketamine works, they're probably lying.
Right, got you. But it's a different mechanism completely from other antidepressants, it sounds like, from what you're saying.
We think so, yeah. It's hitting, at least initially, it's hitting different receptors, NDMA receptors, glutamate receptors.
You got anything else, or should we go about a recap? See if I can tell you what I've learnt.
Absolutely, can do a recap.
I think I might get some of this wrong. All right, so dive in, as I'm sure you will. So, special K, K-hole. It can be a hallucinogenic street drug, although it started off as not a street drug, both as an analgesic and an anaesthetic.
Correct.
Settings such as the battlefield, Vietnam, to help poor soldiers with terrible injuries get off the battlefield in less pain than they would have. But hey, it has been shown in enough numbers to make it a legal medical drug in America that it can treat TRD.
Treatment-resistant.
Treatment-resistant depression. Yeah. And that is not so much the severity of depression, or it tends to be a major depressive episode, but more to do with the fact that at least 2 medical treatments have been tried, or drug treatments have been tried, and both have lacked success. What does success mean? It means a reduction in terms of reaction is a 50% reduction in symptoms as measured on some kind of scale, delivered by the clinician, not the patient.
Correct.
And indeed remission, which is a certain level, a low level, scored on one of those scales. And that's what's exciting. Other things that are exciting about it appear to be lack of long-term side effects and the fact that it acts incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
Within 40 minutes in some cases, and you've seen it with your own 2 eyes. And the other thing is that although one needs to be mindful of the fact that you could develop a dependency, if your dose frequency is controlled, that becomes less of an issue.
mostly people are becoming dependent on ketamine in the same way they might become dependent on any other drug that helps them.
Right.
In other words, they're taking it regularly, but at the same dose.
And is that a dependency? Yes, but it's not based on increasing your tolerance to it.
It's not a
It's based on it doing something good for
to help you.
for God's sake.
Yeah.
I got it.
Takeaway messages. Ketamine is exciting. It could help people with treatment-resistant depression, but it's not yet frontline treatment for depression. You're not going to be able to go down to your doctor and get it because we're still getting more data all the time on it to make sure that people are going to respond well to it.
Just 2 more questions to finish up. One, would you, as a shrink, you prescribe KET before ECT? And don't say it depends, because you always say that.
I'm afraid it does, though.
You're such a twat.
I'm afraid it does.
It depends. What kind of doctor are you? I could say that. I could sit there in front of a patient and go, well, it depends.
Yeah, I mean, I would regard both as fairly far down the decision tree, but that's a really interesting question. And in fact, it may not be either or. Some people are using ketamine as an anesthetic during ECT treatment to improve response rates to ECT.
Yeah.
So watch this space, basically. We just need more research to be done.
I think some people might feel uncomfortable with the fact that some of the things you say sound like experimentation, trial and error. And I think people shouldn't be
that's medicine.
uncomfortable about that.
Because
that's the answer. You just said it.
Well, not everybody responds well to existing treatments across medicine.
And of course, the brain is so complex that it's more likely to be unpredictable.
Yeah, so is the heart, so are the lungs. It's perhaps scarier because we're experimenting, if you will, on the brain. But we need to, and in fact, we need more money to do it. We need much bigger studies.
Yeah. By the way, have I told you about my asthma digital project I'm doing, which captures the data from thousands of asthma sufferers from the point of them applying medication, so that analysis can be done on the data as to how effective their preventive medication is, as opposed to their non-preventive. I can't remember what the word is.
Yeah. Right.
It's an Internet of Things project I'm working on.
Oh, right.
Finally, an interesting project after 32 years in IT.
That sounds really fascinating.
Is
this
cool.
a side hustle?
No, it's part of my... I wish I had a side hustle. I'd love to have a side... this is our side hustle. We've got a side hustle. This is it, right? It's not paying, but it's a side hustle.
Right. It's a side hustle of your company.
No, yeah. Well, it's not even. It's a mainstream hustle.
It's a mainstream hustle. You're getting employed. You're getting paid good money to do it.
Excellent money to help people. I'm very compassionate and would love to help people as long as I get a large slice of coin. No, it is it's a data platform. So we're collecting every puff that people have on their inhalers, and then we have that data.
No, I think Internet of Things is going to be fascinating and very useful. I think for psychiatry, it's very useful to have activity data. Because that's a great objective measure actually of depression if you think about it.
What is?
How active you are at night, how active you are during the day.
Oh,
fantastic objective measures of
amazing.
Your effect. Yeah, because if you think about it, if you're not sleeping well, you're going to be more active than normal at night.
Yeah,
and you're going to be less active during the day.
And so easy with just an Apple Watch to do that.
Hey, so digital technology is really going to help us, I think, going forward.
This is another ep, my friend.
Oh yeah, it probably is.
Yeah, because it's something I know about finally.
So anyway, take-home message on ketamine is it's showing exciting potential in the management of treatment-resistant depression and in acute management of suicidal thoughts and behaviours even. Its use is likely to expand. There may then be a backlash because of the connotations that ketamine has, but I think that would be unfair. But more research needs to be done, and we need people to donate, actually, their money for such research. But anyway, we should end there.
That was a good summary of my summary, actually. And we should talk about our social meds.
Yes, YTLF.
YTLF, but you've got to spell out the WHY. So WHYTLF, YTLF. That's our Facebook handle. It's our Twitter handle. It's our Instagram handle. But you said we're going to make it better.
It's also our website.
And it's also our website, ytlf.com. Our email address, hi@ytlf.com. We would love to hear from you, cats.
Yeah, and please do rate us on whichever podcast platform you use.
Which is Spotify or iTunes or SoundCloud.
Very good or excellent. We don't mind which.
No, we're not fussy. But we are a bit needy.
Yeah. All right, so see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.